All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development 1100 Programming Fundamentals with C# class, I am creating a series of video presentations that are based on the PowerPoint slides for the textbook we use for the class. That textbook is shown on screen right now. It's Murach's 7th edition. And so far, I have gone through the first 7 chapters and also chapter 11. All right. So from this particular section, I still have 8, 9, and 10 to go. And right now, as you probably guessed then, I'm going to start with chapter 8. This will probably be one of the longer lectures. If you look on here, you'll notice there's 73 slides as an example. In the last chapter I just completed, there were 38. Plus, I'd like to really go in and delve fairly deeply into arrays. And when I get done, I'm going to build a couple applications for you that are not shown in the book. All right. So with that said, let's get started. Here's our cover page, Chapter 8, How to Use Arrays and Collections. Again, we will concentrate more on arrays, which are a type of collection. All right, than we will on generic collections in this chapter. All right, so talk about, for the applied objectives, talk about one-dimensional, rectangular, jagged arrays, write code that works with a collection, distinguish between a for loop and a for each loop, explain how the array class can be used with an array, describe how the null conditional operator works and when you would use it, distinguish between untyped and typed collection classes, and then talk about some collections such as lists, sorted lists, queues, stacks, and array lists. All right, now, before we go on in here, I'm going to show you, because I typically do it this way, I'm going to give a little prelude, so to speak, into what arrays are and how they're used. I'm going to use, when I do this, I'm going to go through a couple of examples that are not in any book or anything else. Okay, so I'm going to, and I am not an artistic person, but that said, I'm going to draw out something right here. And if you say, I don't know what this is, I'm going to show you right now. All right, we're going to keep this fairly simple. It may not look like it right now, but you'll have to take my word for it. This is going to be fairly simplistically done. All right, and you might be thinking right now, okay, fine, but I have absolutely no idea what you're doing right now. Well, I'm going to explain it momentarily. All right, on July 5th, 2022, I celebrated the beginning, or my 6-year anniversary at Rankin Technical College. So I literally moved to Missouri on July 1st, what would they make that, 2016, I guess. All right. When I did, my wife stayed in Rockton, Illinois, which is right on the Illinois-Wisconsin border, and she stayed there because I had a daughter who was going to college in Rockford, Illinois. So she ended up staying there for 2 more years, and I lived in an apartment by myself for 2 years. So that's what this is supposed to be simulating right here. Now, I had an apartment in Lake St. Louis, Missouri, and we're going to just assume for a second that my address was 123 Main Street in Lake St. Louis, Missouri. 63367. That was not my address, but you get the idea. So if somebody wanted to send me a letter, or let's say I got a bill in the mail, it might come to Jeff Scott like this. All right. And if you imagine, I was actually in an 8-family unit, but I'm just showing 5 here, just so it fits nicely on the screen. So imagine that I was in number 1, Jones was in 2, Brown was in 3, White was in 4, and Green was in 5. So if they really wanted to make sure, they could have said apartment 1. Okay, so they could have said that, apartment 1, and it probably would have gotten to me. All right, now let's assume that the person who lived in apartment 2, let's assume their name was Mary Jones. Now, if they put Mary Jones in here and they put apartment 1, would the mail go to me or would the mail go to her? It just depends. Depends on how much the mail person is looking, etc. But what I want you to get out of what I'm going through right now, I'm not trying to waste your time, but I'm trying to let you know all of these people have the same address. They're all occupants of the same address. All right? And if I move out, and I did, and let's say that I move out and somebody named, I don't know, all right, Karen Black moves in there. All right, so now they're in apartment 1. Well, it's still 123 Main Street, apartment 1. It's just that the contents have changed. And I've given examples like this before where I have said, imagine that where I'm housed is 751 Parr Road in Wentzville, Missouri. But if for some reason Rankin were to move out of there and somebody else moved in, the contents would change, but it would still be 751 Parr Road in Wentzville, Missouri. Like I said, even though I moved out of here and Karen Black moved in, it is still 123 Main Street, apartment 1 in Lake St. Louis, Missouri. So what does this have to do with anything? Well, imagine I wanted to go and create variables for these. So I could do this. I could say string, and let's say I called it APT1, and I set it equal to Karen Black. And I'm just going to copy this to make it a little simpler here. And then I've got an apartment 2, an apartment 3, an apartment 4, and an apartment 5. So we're going to assume that in apartment 2, we have, I think we said Mary Jones. In apartment 3, we'll have Mark Brown. In apartment 4, we'll have Jack White. And in apartment 5, we will have, Jennifer Green. How about Jenny Green? Okay. Now, nothing wrong with doing that. We've got 5 different variables. Now, one thing though is they all share the same address. So is there any way that I could make one variable that had 5 components? And the answer is yes. I would come in here and say string. There's 2 ways I can do it. I'm going to show you both. I could do string bracket bracket equals. Oh, I want to give you the right syntax, and I did some JavaScript stuff before, so let me just very quickly, because like I said, it's not my intention here to give you wrong information. For a real simple example here. That isn't it. Okay, I think that this will work. I think we're able to just do this. String, bracket, bracket. We got to give it a name. So let's say we call it APTS for apartments. All right. And I'm going to say here equals, and I'm going to put in here, I'm going to grab every bit of this. And you'll notice if you look, I'm putting commas in here. I am not putting in semicolons on the end. That would be incorrect. And I can put this over multiple lines, and I'm basically doing that just so that you can see all of it on the screen. So what I have done right here is I've created a new thing that we have not talked about yet in C#, known as an array. These brackets here are signifying that it's an array, and it's an array of strings. So it's an array or a collection of strings that's called apartments. That's it. Now, the other way I could have done that is I could have just come in here and said something like, let's call it apartments 2, so we've got a little difference between them. And I could have said, I think I have to give it a size here. And then I could have come in and said this, APTS 0 equals, and you get the idea. I'll go through all of it, but just so you see it. I don't think I'm giving you anything syntactically incorrect here. I'll have to check on it later. And if I am, I apologize in advance. Maybe I've got laying around here. Maybe I have, I don't know, an example of a string array. But what I want to get across to you is this. First of all, an array is a collection. Okay? This says I'm going to have an array of strings called APTS, and I would have to have a 2 there because that's what I called it. And it's going to hold 5 different strings. Now, when you work with arrays are what are referred to as being zero-based. So the first element that's in the array, the first thing, is the element 0. So it goes from 0 to 4. There's an old computer programmer joke that when you tell a programmer to count to 10, they say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because they start with 0. Now you'll notice the difference here, since we knew what these were in advance, and we would need a semicolon at the end here, we can sit there and just give the array its initial values in here. Here we're pretending we didn't know the values, so we're putting them in one at a time. All right, so what an array is it's a collection of elements. So here's an element, here's one string element, here's one string element, here's one string element, here is one string element, and here is one string element. Now, unlike JavaScript, for those of you who were in Mr. Gudmist's class last summer, the AWD1100, or if you had it with me, and I don't think any of you did, all right, in C#, each array element must be of the same data type. So in JavaScript, you can mix, and I could put numbers in here. I could put Booleans like true or false. I could put dates. I can put strings. I could put characters. You can't do that in here. Since this is an array of strings, everything that goes in here must be a string. And again, it's a collection. So this is referred to typically as the 0th element, the 1 element, the 2 element, the 3 element, the 4 element. Sometimes they're saying, I mean, I've always read this as, this would say apps2 sub 0. Sub is short for subscript, which is the number that you have inside of the brackets. apps2 sub 1, apps2 sub 2, apps2 sub 3, and apps2 sub 4. All right? So again, imagine that instead of this, let's say that I had 10 students. All right? And I wanted to put in their grades. So I could say student student 1, and let's say that they got a 56. They didn't do well. So I could come through here and I could make 6 of these, or 10 of these. All right, I'm just going to make random numbers in here. And we'll assume the last student didn't take the test. So I could come in here and I could make 10 different variables. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. All right, or I could do it more like this, where I would come in here and type in, instead of string, I type in int bracket bracket grades equal, and I'd put in these 10 grades. 56, 78, 89, 98, 44, 88, 93, 100, 22, and 0. All right. So now, rather than 10 different variables, it's as though, again, what I tried to get across before, and I didn't do a very good job, is in here, one of the things I had in the apartment was there was one big mailbox that had, in my case, 8, but as it's shown here, 5 different compartments. So the mail person would come, open it up, and put the mail for Black in the apartment in the first slot, the mail for Jones in the second slot, etc. Well, again, that's kind of what we're doing here. All right. But if we did this, the other way we could have set that up, and I'll just make this grades 2. All right. And I'll say equals new int, and it will have a size of 10. That means it'll have elements 1 through 9 in it. All right, so I'll tell you what, I'll just do it like this. Maybe it'll be a little faster. And I'm just going to change this from student to grades 2. Just change these real fast. Now I can't do it like this. It needs to know which one I'm talking about. So that's the 0th element. Oops. And that needs a 2 on it. That's the 1 element, or subscript 1, subscript 2, subscript 3, subscript 4. You get the idea. Subscript 5, subscript 6, subscript 7, subscript 8, and subscript 9. Now, looking at this, you may not, really see a lot of benefit in this. But again, if I had 500 grades, think of what a pain that would be to set these up like this. But if you remember, back in an earlier chapter, we talked about for loops. All right. And for loops, especially, you can use a while or a do while, but for loops work, for lack of better words, almost remarkably well with arrays. So an array is a collection of data, each of the same type. All right. That's housed basically in one area. All right. Sorry, that was a little long. So what was that? I'm already 20 minutes in. So you can set up an array like this, where you declare it and then assign, or you can do it together. So this is what I tried to show you. Okay. You can have an array of integers, an array of strings, an array of doubles, an array of booleans, etc., but they all have to be of the same data type. Okay? All right. Now, when you set up an array, if you do not initialize it, so going back to the example that we looked at before, this example, if we just did this, and we did not do this, all right, if we just did this, then by default, every value in that array is initialized as 0. When we did the strings before, every value here, if I don't initialize, they're all initialized automatically by the system to the empty string. And here are some additional ones. I'm not going to read them to you. You can look at them yourselves. All right. So when you refer to an array, you typically refer to the array by the index. So the name of the array, and then in brackets is the index. Now this is a very important piece here. This created a new array of size 4. So the elements are 0, 1, 2, 3. If you attempt to reference an element outside of that, like they show here with 4, you get, I don't think it's an index out of range exception. I thought it was an array index out of range exception, but they're probably right here, and I'm probably wrong. So this is kind of what I showed you right there. All right. So you can set it up in different ways. I showed you this way right here. I believe this is the way that I showed you. Let's see. Like that and like that. But there are different ways of doing it. I showed you this way because in my humble opinion, the second way, it's the easiest to understand. If you don't agree, there's different ways that you can do it. All right. All right. Now, arrays have a length. Okay. So let's say that I went back and I want to show you the example that I just showed you. And let's just work with his grades. Okay. So for right now, I'm going to get rid of all these strings I had and all that other stuff I'd shown you earlier. I'm going to get rid of all that. Okay. And I'm just going to work with our strings here. Okay. And I want, in fact, there, from right here on. So this is what I want to work with. Now, where different looping constructs come in handy is I could come in here and do this. I could say for int LCV, my loop control variable, equals 0. LCV is less than grades.length plus LCV. All right, and then I'm going to say, I'm just going to, I could do it in different ways, but let's assume it's a console program. And I'll say console.writeLine, and I'll say array element plus LCV dot to string plus is plus grades LCV. Now, you might look at that and say, that makes, hey, I'm sorry, you just went over that, but it makes absolutely no sense. First, let me tell you what that would print out. All right, and I would probably want to put a blank or a \n before each one. That would print out array element 0 is, and in this case, it's 56. All right, so if you can imagine, so that would be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, that shouldn't have been 10. Oh, Jeffrey. That's 0. That's 1. That's 2. That's why you always start from the beginning and not from the end. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And those values here, looking at these, are 0, 22, 100, 93, 88, 44, 98, 89, and 78. Now, you may or may not agree with me, but when I show you this, what's so nice about it is literally it's 4 lines of code. And really, this is 1 line spread over 2 lines. So it's 3 lines of code, and I get all this. Now, let's suppose, I'm not going to add these, but let's pretend we added 90 more grades. And finally, the last one we put in was grades 99. We'll say the person got a 99. All right. Now, we don't have to change anything in here. It'll print all this stuff out, and then it'll print out, basically like 90 more, where the last one will say array element 99 is 99. So ideally, at least, you start to see the power of being able to use a collection such as an array. I'm going to give you one more quick thing, and then I'll jump back into our presentation. And that is, years ago, I took a class at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, a child psychology class, and it was in a lecture hall, and we had approximately 300 people in the class. A couple reasons I remember it. Number one, the teacher was very different. He told us on the first day, I can't even remember his name, but that he had a daughter, and his wife was born in France, so they were raising the daughter bilingually. She was 4 years old and could speak fluent English and fluent French, which I thought was kind of neat. And the other thing I remember about that class is it was unbelievably hot in there. It was a very hot summer, and there was one window that you couldn't open. And one of the first days of class, they had the door shut. And I had worked late the night before, no excuse. I fell asleep. And of course, I dropped my pen and it rolled all the way up by the instructor. And the instructor made one of the students near me shake me till I woke up, and I had to walk down there and pick it up, and he kind of embarrassed me in front of the class, which was fine. Maybe I deserved it. All right. But I even said in front of everybody, I said, if it wasn't so frickin' hot in here, people wouldn't fall asleep. It isn't you. And he agreed. All right. So why am I telling you any of this? Imagine it was the first day of class. And on that first day of class, there were 300 of us in there waiting for the instructor. And the way it works in a 4-year college is you have to wait 15 minutes. And if nobody comes in during that time, supposedly you can leave and you cannot be marked absent. It's not always the case, but that's the way it's supposed to be. So let's suppose it's 5 minutes into class and the instructor hasn't come yet. Now, after 5 minutes, a young person walks in. We don't know if that's the instructor or not, but she comes up to the front and says, "Hi, I'm the teaching assistant for this class. Dr. Smith, let's say, is going to be a little bit late. He's running late, and he will be here in about 5 minutes. But until then, I'm going to give each one of you, and you may never have seen these before, and I've done this different ways, but I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in my Google Images because I'm dating myself right here, and I'm going to talk about Tinker Toys. These are things we played with as kids. They look like this. So you had different things that you hooked together. And actually, ours weren't even as refined as these are. So why am I telling you this? All right. So imagine what happened is that teaching assistant passed out 300 different Tinker Toys. Some of them were these like pegs here. Some of them were round, like little wheels. Some of them were connector type of things, etc. But everybody got one, and then the teaching assistant walked out. Well, let's face it. It's like if you're playing with a bottle cap. I can sit there and do this. I can roll it around a little bit, but there's not much I can do with it. But now suppose that everybody in the class decides that they're going to grab their Tinker Toys and put them together. If you don't like Tinker Toys for my example, then imagine instead that we were using Legos. All right? And we were given basically a mess like this, and we decided to put them all together, and once we did, we were able to build something that looked more like that. Well, this is like when we had the 10 different grades or the 100 different grades, and they were all not really connected to one another. Here is what happens after we put them into an array. So these are called scalar, S-C-A-L-A-R, or elementary data items, where this is referred to as typically a data structure. So an array is an example of a data structure. All right, I must already be getting up there. I'm at 31 minutes. I'll go about 10 more minutes, and then we'll end this particular part of it. So here they're showing you literally how you can use a loop like I showed you before. The key thing to remember, and what confuses people, all I is in here, or LCV in the example I gave, it's a placeholder. So the first time through, I is 0. So it represents the first array element. The last time through, I is 9. So it represents the 10th array element. So this is just a placeholder. All right? This is very similar to the example that I showed you. All right. You can use different kinds of loops to do a lot of things in an array. There's a good example. So if I go back into the program that I showed you right here, let's go back and just say that there's 10 array elements, just like that. We won't make this, we'll get rid of all this stuff that we added here. Okay, so we've got that. But if I want to add up all these and find out how many points collectively we got between the tests, okay, I'm going to grab this loop, and let's just comment that loop out so this wouldn't print. But I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a variable, an int that's called total score points. Kind of a weird name, but I'm going to set it equal to 0. All right. But now I come in here and I'm going to say total score points plus equal grades to LCV. And if that confuses you, what that is going to do right there is it's going to add 56 plus 78 plus 89 plus 98 plus 44 plus 88 plus 93 plus 100 plus 22 plus 0. Now, I don't know what that is, and I really and truly don't care. I'm going to make up a number. I'm going to say it's 612. So if I did that, and then afterwards, let's just say I did a message box dot show, and I could say something like the total number of grade points is, and I'm going to add to that just total score points, and then I'll put in my heading totals. That right there would print out something along the lines of, I don't remember what I said, let's say 612. That would say the total number of grade points is 612. Something like that. Now, I've done this. Now I've got a total. Okay, I've got a total number of points. What if I want the average? I'm going to put a double in here, and I'm going to call this test score average. And I'm just going to set it equal to 0.0. All right, but now I can come in, now that I've got this total, I can come in here and I can say test score average equals my total score points divided by 10.0. I'm going to put a 0.0 in there, all right, so that it'll work. So I'm dividing by a double. Otherwise, I would lose that. What else can I do? I can come in here and I can say grades 2 dot length. Now, the only problem I'm going to have with this is it's going to throw away any decimal place I have in here. So I could just do a cast here and type in double. Now, if I go in and I add this, I'm going to put it in here as a different message box. So the first message box that you see there, that's going to print out this. The total number of grade points is, and here I'm going to say the average test score is, and this, of course, will be test score average. And here I'll put in average. So that's going to say the average test score is, and let's say when I print it out, I'm going to say here dot toString, which I should have done anyway, N2 for 2 decimal places, and I'll add a dot toString onto this one as well. You don't have to do that, but it's considered a cleaner way to code. So that's going to say that the average was a 61.20. Ideally, what I'm getting across to you is the fact that when you're working with large collections of data, this is a way that you can use them all as one contiguous unit, and you can do a lot of different manipulations, etc. with them. All right, so here they've got the same kind of thing. I'm just using my own examples. Now, let's see where I am here. Am I up to 40 minutes yet? Close enough. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to pick it up with slide 13 talking about the for each loop. I'll be back with that momentarily.